Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Frank Stepan. I'm here with Petr and Václav, and they are both Czechia experts. So let's welcome you both and give a brief introduction to both of you, please. Petr, we'll start with you.
Yes, so I'm a professor of geography at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and also at Charles University in Prague, Czechia. And I am an economic geographer. So my interest in Czechia is kind of both professional, but also personal.
Okay, and Václav?
So, hi guys, I'm chemist by education. We studied with Petr together, and I'm living in Switzerland since 30 years and born in Czechia 1963. And my interest in the short name comes from my own neglecting the Swiss short name Czechia, which I outragely hated when I heard it first 1993. So I've been through this leap of neglecting something new to me.
Okay, it's a good segue because that's exactly what we want to talk about, is the shortening of the name of the Czech Republic to Czechia, and to kind of the hope of this podcast is to kind of make an educational campaign to those people who've never heard of this change, who hate it, maybe who love it and need to try to explain why they like it. Just basically to understand the reason why there's this change. So let's start with 101. Now, the Czech Republic is a country that was created after the Velvet Divorce of Czechoslovakia. So let's, Petr, would you want to briefly run through the creation of Czechia and why it was called the Czech Republic in the first place? How about that?
Well, the vast majority of countries have two names, formal names and short or geographic names. And these names are basically used in different situations. So in the case of Czechia, the formal name is the Czech Republic. And also in 1993, a short name or geographic name, Czechia, was nationally standardized. So the Czech Republic had its short name standardized nationally since the very beginning of the country's existence in 1983.
Okay, and tell us, Václav, like, how's your that experience that you had, that story about you dealing in the Swiss language, or when you were in Switzerland, about the shortening of the word, and you said it irritated you. Explain that story.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to correct the statement. It's not a change, just the short name was registered. So the Czechia is not here to replace the Czech Republic. This stays as a formal name, no passport change and nothing such needed. For me, Czechoslovakia was my home, and I came to Switzerland 1990, and Czechoslovakia fell apart 1993, and I had no time to study at those times. I was building my career up, had small children. I had no time to study all those arguing between the Czechs and Slovaks, and suddenly I heard my homeland disappeared, and now it's called Czechia. And for me, it sounds like Asia, which means Asia in Czech, and I really hated it. My Swiss wife told me it's completely normal. It's like Italy. It's completely normal name. No, I never were gonna say this. It sounds like Asian country, Czech Republic, which is German Czech Republic. This is the proper name. So this was my statement, 1993, and I have heard it around me constantly all the time. Suddenly I got used to the term Czechia, which is Czechia in Swiss German, and suddenly I realized I'm using it myself. So this is the story about it.
Interesting. So originally you were in the camp of wanting to have the long form name.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And what about you, Petr? Were you instantly attracted to Czechia as a name, or were you also someone who kind of subscribed to the long form name and only wanted the long form name?
Well, for a long time, I didn't really know or thought of Czechia as a short name. So I have used the Czech Republic in all my academic writings and articles. And then in the early 2000s, maybe it was 2002, maybe 2003, I was passing by a colleague at Charles University, and in 2 sentences, he mentioned something about my publications. But he said, well, your publications are great, but there's just this one thing. And I said, what thing? Well, you're using the Czech Republic. And I said, so what else should I be using? I haven't really thought about it. And he said, well, of course, Czechia. So I stopped for 5 seconds. I thought about it, and it suddenly occurred to me that basically that's really what I should be using in order to be consistent with the usage of short country names for all other countries I have been talking about in my publications. So that's, that was it. It was like a 5-second encounter with a colleague of mine, and I was instantly converted.
Interesting. So that's the whole point of this podcast also, is that people might have that epiphany by listening to the three of us talk about the name, because a lot of people, I think, just don't spend much time talking about it or thinking about it, especially if you're not from Czechia. So now Prague is the capital, and it's, in my opinion, perhaps the most beautiful capital or most beautiful city in Europe, and certainly in the world. And I think in some ways our discussion is kind of strange, because if you ask, for example, the typical American, they could not care less about what people in France call their country, the United States. Les États-Unis, or, nobody cares what it's called. And for example, I have no idea what the Czechs call the United States. What's the name of our country for the Czechs?
Spojené státy americké.
And do you have a short version, Václav?
USA or America.
Whew. See, and so you don't have Americans debating about what the Czechs call our country, right? Nobody cares as long as the Czechs are not calling us country of assholes or, something like that. They're not calling us any offensive name. We really don't care what other countries decide to call our country, as long as it's not offensive and bad. And so what I find in some ways very interesting about this whole thing is that the Czechs actually really do care a lot about how English speakers call their name, which of course is understandable because English is kind of the world tongue at the moment. But do you guys ever reflect on that kind of fact that here we are, you're not fighting about what to call your name in your language. You're fighting what to call your country in another language.
I think it is strange, but maybe it is also understandable. And it is because there basically has been also and still is an ongoing discussion about the usage of the short country name in Czech. And so I think this discussion in Czech about the usage of the short country name has kind of translated also into the discussion about the usage of the short name in English.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating because I didn't know that. I thought there was fundamental agreement among the Czechs themselves about what the short country name should be for their country, which is, my understanding, Česko.
That's correct.
Yes, you are right.
Václav?
Yeah, that's correct. Unfortunately, the Czech president Václav Havel didn't like the short name for the simple reason that he was simply missing, as most of us do until today, the Slovensko. So the Czechoslovakia meets in Czech Československo. People are missing the Slovakian part in the name of the state, so they push the republic instead to have a noble, long-sounding name. This is the main reason. It's emotional reason. You are missing something. To me, Česko sounded a long time like an amputated leg. I was still missing something there. So that's why I was telling it in the beginning, Czech Republic.
But wait, Peter, your country is amputated in that sense that Czechoslovakia is amputated. Right? So why shouldn't the name be amputated too?
I don't think, I mean, it's the personal feeling of Czech speakers that it is amputated, but in reality, the name in Czech, short name Česko, is basically a standard form of how country names are created and used in the Czech language. So actually, at the beginning of Czechoslovakia, there was a hyphen between two country names, or two parts of the country names, Česko hyphen Slovensko. And in English, it should have been Czechia hyphen Slovakia. But then the hyphen was removed and it became Československo in Czech and Czechoslovakia in English. So I think that the main source of this debate and the fact that some Czechs basically feel that Česko is some kind of amputated name, and also that Czechia is not a proper short name in English.
Okay. And so the Slovenskos, so explain to me a little bit more about that, Václav. Like when you say that this amputation that some of the Czechs feel, because I guess maybe that is the crux of the problem, potentially. I thought it was the fact that they're very proud of being a republic.
I think both. I will cite our colleague Vladimír Hirš from our Civic Initiative, who has written a series of articles about it. And one of those is explaining this. The article is called Attempt of Analysis of the Resistance Against the Short Name. And it's twofold. The part, I'm lost now. Can we cut this off somehow?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sorry. So Peter, help me. I'm so full with this Czechia nonsense that I cannot sell it now on the spot. That's crazy. So it's twofold. Czechoslovakia was mainly a Czech project, driven by Czechs, and Slovaks have been just coming along. Because you needed to build up a new state in which the Slavic element has majority, as there has been more ethnical Germans than Slovak in the Czechoslovakia. So this is the reason, and the French call it the cordon sanitaire de Czechoslovakie. For them, it was like a buffer state. There, this was it. So this was the reason. So it was a Czech project, and so Slovak jumped off every time they could in the Second World War, and after 1993 already. So Czechs, for them, they've been feeling like Czechoslovaks mainly, and the Slovaks has been feeling like Slovaks mainly. Would you like to add on it, Peter?
Well, yeah, the point is that the Czechs really identified themselves with the country of Czechoslovakia and with its name, Czechoslovakia, which can't really be said about the Slovaks, as Václav pointed out. So suddenly, when Czechoslovakia disappeared as a country and two independent countries were created, the Czechs had really difficult time to identify themselves with this new, smaller country. And also because of, the disappearance of the name Czechoslovakia, they had a hard time to identify with the short country name, which basically in Czech was sounding exactly as the first part of the country name Česko, Slovensko, Czechoslovakia. So I think that's why they found it also linguistically unappealing, and they basically, many of them rejected it and didn't like it because they were not used to it. And it is fair to say that this discussion about the short name in Czech Česko has been going on since maybe the 1930s or maybe 40s or 1950s. So it was not that this discussion suddenly appeared after 1993.
Got it. Understood. So let me try to understand the psychology of the Czech in what is their problem with this? Like, what would be your message to them? Because it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that foreigners or English speakers, let's just say, are happy to call your country whatever the hell you want to call it. And we're like, you want to call it Czechia? Great. You want to call it the Czech Republic? Fine. It's kind of longer, but it's kind of a pain in the ass, but we'll do it for you. You know, so there's you know, like the Gambia wants to be called the Gambia, for God's sakes. I mean, why the Gambia? Why can't I just call it Gambia? But that's what they're asking. So we kind of comply. The Netherlands, God, what a mouthful is that? So I don't think the resistance is coming from the English speakers. They were like, tell us what to call your name, we'll call it that. Just like in Peking became Beijing, like when when Leningrad became St. Petersburg, they told us to change the name. Don't call it Leningrad anymore. Call it St. Petersburg. Okay, all right, fine. I'll call it St. Petersburg if that's what you want. You know, so these things. So am I correct to say that? And then if it's true, then what is the resistance? Why are they so passionate about this issue, about resisting this thing, all the way from your president sometimes to the common person selling tomatoes on the street?
I think you have started already why they are proud of the word republic. And this is the second emotional reason for me. First is the missing of Slovakia, and second is the word republic. As for the most of Czechs, the word republic has a very, very positive spin due to the successful first republic called 1918 to 1938, which Czechoslovakia for sure was a democratic island in the middle of fascist regime in Europe, and economically pretty successful. That's one of the reasons that the word republic has a positive spin for the Czechs.
Understood. Peter, what do you think?
I think that the main issue is, first of all, not being used to the short name. So it is something new, and we all know that old habits die hard. So that's one thing. The second one is what I would call the hegemonic discourse. Basically, the short name being rejected by the first president of independent Czechia, saying that basically it is unacceptable. And consequently, the politicians in Czechia started to use, or all of them used, only the formal name in Czech, the Czech Republic, and also, of course, in English. So in terms of the media, in terms of basically the press, education, Czechs basically only heard the long formal name their entire lives. That's what they are used to it. So for them, the short name is something new, weird, unacceptable. And for example, I know that English teachers in Prague or in Czechia basically argue that Czechia is grammatically incorrect. They do not allow students to use it. And, so it's not being used at school,
but hold on,
in Czech or in English.
But when you're saying at school, and you're saying they've heard it all their lives, they've heard the Czech Republic all their lives. You're talking about some of the classes in Czechia are spoken in English, are written in English, correct?
Well, I'm saying that.
Are you comparing Czechia to Česko?
Yeah, well, no. English is now the most
prevalent
foreign language to be taught and studied in Czechia. So I'm talking about the English-speaking classes in terms of Czechia, but also, classes in Czech language. So regular education is not using the short name in the Czech language. They only use the formal name. So if you look at textbooks for, little kids, it all talks only about the Czech Republic in Czech. They never use Czechia. And of course, this then becomes ingrained in your brain. That's what you have learned, that's what you know. So anything else sounds weird and for some people simply unacceptable.
So a classical statement in the Czech school books, our homeland is called Česká republika. You don't find the term Česko nowhere. Really? They describe all the other countries, our neighbors, Rakousko, Austria, Německo, Germany, Polsko, Poland, and Česká republika all the time. You don't find the word Česko in Czech textbooks.
Ah, I didn't know that. So that really is one of the problems, because if they use Česko all the time in their own language, in the Czech language, then people would be more probably accepting of another language shortening their name.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So this is your problem.
Absolutely. It's our homegrown problem, 100%. You don't find a Czech politician who tells you word Česko on TV. They probably write it on their placards. They write it on their heads, like Silné Česko, strong Czechia. But in their daily life, they either call the country Čechy, which is Bohemia, which is wrong, or they call the country Česká republika. If you hear the word Česko from the mouth of a politician, it's 1 promille, something like this.
Wow. Okay. So now I've really been enlightened. Now I finally understand the fundamental problem. I thought I had this idea that the Czechs were calling their country casually, constantly, Česko, Česko, Česko. And so I thought, okay, well, why do they get all upset if another language wants to shorten the name too? But now you hit the nail on the head. So, Peter, what do you think is going to have to happen? What do you predict is going to happen? And what do you think should happen?
Well, I have to mention here that the short name in Czech, Česko, has been gaining acceptance. So it is now being used by the media. It is also being used by many people in Czech. So it's not that it would not be used. So that's the first thing. The second important point is that as Czechia in English is being increasingly accepted and used abroad, and I am talking about Google Maps, Apple Maps. I'm talking about all kinds of different, applications on the internet. I'm talking about the usage of Czechia by the European Union, by the United Nations, and so on. So the Czechs will increasingly encounter the short name, and they will basically learn to see it and eventually to accept it. It's not that all Czechs reject the name Czechia, of course not. Many Czechs that are already using it, but my feeling is that the change in the perception of the usage of Czechia will come from abroad rather than being kind of a homegrown movement. So I'm convinced that Czechia will be used, and in the future it will be basically the standard way how to call the country in English.
This has an economic aspect as well. If you imagine that we have our own state since 27 years, and we have paid 1 billion Czech crowns, which is around $40 million US, for the destination marketing for the Czech Republic. And people still, after 27 years, better recognize in English-speaking countries Czechoslovakia than the Czech Republic. For me, we are just burning our resources. We are putting money into something, and now it's the classical sunk cost fallacy. We keep investing in something which doesn't work because we invested so much money into this. So if you take Croatia as an example, nobody knew Croatia before 1991. It was Yugoslavia, or Socialist Federative Republic of Yugoslavia, if we prefer the formal name. And Croatia is a now clear destination brand because it's short and snappy and easy to remember. The same way it's Czechia. We just need to get used to it.
Right.
But our politicians and country marketing and everybody are still rejecting it and prefer the Czech Republic, even if all marketing experts telling them, please use Czechia. They just don't listen.
Well, I hope everybody else is listening here to this. And this is going to conclude the video portion of this. To hear the rest of our conversation, listen to the podcast, the audio only version of the podcast at WanderLearn.com. Thank you both, and I'll see you on the other side, on the audio side.